Hello, I'm Marcia Cavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, to know where we are going, it is sometimes useful to pause briefly to look at where we've been. And we will do that tonight as we discuss the year's top stories in crime, politics, public projects, and a few that missed the headlines. We will also offer some predictions for the new year. Joining us are old acquaintances not to be forgotten. Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources. Mike Pearlstein, investigative reporter, WWL-TV Channel 4. Don Ostrom, Channel 12's Future Watch reporter. And Stephanie Grace, columnist, The New Orleans Advocate. I'm going to go over to Mike first. And the category is crime. This year, where have we been with it?
Well, like all years in New Orleans and the region, you know, this list is never difficult. It's always a matter of what items don't make the top 5. But starting with what I list as the number 5 would be the change of command at the NOPD. It was a bit of a surprise because of the timing, but perhaps not unexpected, that Ronald Surpass, the hand-picked police chief by Mayor Landrieu back in 2010, decided to part ways. Didn't go far. He went to Loyola University, where he is a professor of practice. But you know, it was an interesting move because there was a lot behind the scenes when they had the press conference announcing Surpass' departure. Certainly it was, you know, congratulations all around and what a great job. But behind the scenes there was a lot of acrimony between the mayor's office and Surpass, and he really you know, came in with a lot of bold plans that were very difficult to take root for a variety of reasons: the consent decree, the budget crisis, depletion of troop strength down to, you know, modern day lows. That led to very poor morale among officers, and it was just, you know, trying to bail water out of a sinking boat, you know, that was rushing in faster than he could bail it out. That he was replaced in-house by Michael Harrison, who had been a commander of the 7th District. And he's now named the permanent chief. So it'll be interesting to see how his tenure goes. Obviously, he's, I think, has a little warmer relations with the mayor.
Still under consent decree, of course.
And still fighting that, yes.
Okay, next one, Mike.
Okay, well, the long-awaited indictments in the Darren Sharper rape case. Now remember, New Orleans, while it had been revealed some time ago that there was a rape complaint against Darren Sharper, authorities in Los Angeles and then in Arizona jumped ahead of New Orleans with actual formal charges. That left New Orleans in the posture that the DA here could have simply waited for those cases to play out, but instead he took a very different tack, got very, very aggressive, and it was revealed just 2 weeks ago. He had brought in the FBI. They investigated this thing very vigorously and came up with not one but 2 indictments, one in state court, one in federal court. In state court, Darren Sharper and an acquaintance, a co-defendant, Eric Nunez, are charged with aggravated rape, which carries a mandatory life sentence. A wild card in all this is that a ex-St. Bernard Sheriff's deputy, a deputy at the time, Brandon Lichardi, was also brought into that indictment with his own charge of aggravated rape. All of this stemming from alleged drugging women to cause them to pass out and then sexually assault them. So with those mandatory life sentences on the table, you know, that certainly becomes the most serious case facing Darren Sharper of any of the jurisdictions. And we have Sharper still locked up, held without bond in Los Angeles. There was just a detention hearing for Brandon Lichardi in federal court, held without bond, and Eric Nunez is still waiting to see if he'll be allowed to even make bond. He's being held on $2.5 million in state court.
So situation worsens for Darren Sharper.
And you know, it is anyone's guess as to which direction that case goes. Going down number 3, the persistent high murder rate in New Orleans has really emerged as arguably the #1 priority of Mayor Mitchell Andrew and his administration. He has now poured millions of dollars into combating this problem that has plagued New Orleans, not just during his mayoral tenure, but for decades. And we've all seen those, terrible years when New Orleans was actually #1 in per capita murder rate in the country. We still rank in the top 10, but he's pouring a lot of money and effort, and it in many ways is a bigger national story than it is locally, that he's using this NOLA for Life program and ceasefire and all of these sort of think tank driven programs to try to address the problem.
So we are on target for a lower murder rate than the year before?
Very
than last year?
Narrowly lower than last year, which was actually a big jump down. Better in raw numbers, a 30-year low, but per capita, since Katrina, the depleted population still ranks us in the upper tier nationally. It's still a bad New Orleans problem. Next on the list, the NOPD troop strength listed as where's the cavalry? And the department is at about a 30-year low, and it's a modern-day low in the number of officers. And this was something that, there are many factors that led to this. The budget crisis that Landrieu inherited upon taking office put a freeze on hiring for, the first couple of years. And by that point, the attrition had really mounted. And in the face of a consent decree, low pay, officers going, leaving the department for other jobs, a very late push to hire officers and start academy classes has not nearly caught up.
No, but there have been some academy classes completed.
We've had, he promised 5 classes and 150 during 2014. He had 2 classes, not nearly what was promised, and that's a reality wake-up call for him on just how difficult this is.
Let's get to #1.
#1, the bombshell dropped by the Inspector General on the sex crimes unit of the NOPD, in which 5 detectives let more than 1,000 cases go under-investigated that could have been viable cases leading to an arrest, were not pursued, no supplemental report, rape kits not sent for testing in Baton Rouge. The result of that is enormous. The 5 officers reassigned to desk duty under investigation. The special task force within the department to reinvestigate hundreds of these to see if some of these cases can actually lead to an arrest.
And also now a new supervisor there who has gone back to where he was
right,
before.
The problem had been tackled, but apparently not thoroughly enough by Commander Paul Noel. He had at least gotten rid of 800 case backlog of rape kits, and he now inherits, with the exposure of how poorly they were doing over the past couple of years, a 400 kit backlog.
Okay.
So they still have a long ways to go. This is also something that's become a national story. It's led to street protests, women's groups,
right.
And really opened a conversation just about the reporting of sex crimes in general.
All right, Mike, thanks. Over to politics. Stephanie,
Yes.
that would be you.
Yes. Also a jam-packed year, as also as always, I guess I would say. Go right into #5 here. In the regional level, the big story was the DA's office in St. Tammany Parish. We have a new DA who's going to be starting, Amanda Warren Montgomery, who is a former defense attorney. Of course, the big story is that Walter Reed will not be district attorney anymore after decades. Probably most people in St. Tammany and Washington parishes have never known another district attorney, and they never really voted in a district attorney race because Walter Reed was such an institution, people didn't run against him. But he's been really pummeled by investigations, first media investigations by a number of outlets into things that seem to be self-dealing, improper use of campaign funds, a deal he had with the parish hospital where maybe he was getting paid, but he was sending his staffers to actually go to the meetings that he was getting paid to attend. We've heard a lot less of it lately because it's now under a federal investigation. So We're waiting to see how that comes out. But in the meantime, there was an election, and Walter Reed, I think, realized he could not run under the circumstances. So there was a showdown. We ended up with a runoff between a guy named Brian Traynor, who was considered really the establishment candidate. He's a deputy to Sheriff Jack Train, a top deputy. Had a lot of support from the people around, not necessarily Reed openly, but the people around him, the people who are kind of, have been in power for a long time. And the voters said, no, thank you. The voters said, we want somebody else. And I think, coming off of Peter Galvin last year, the coroner who was convicted of similar self-dealing, I think the voters in St. Tammany are kind of looking hard at these machines. And of course, Sheriff Jack Strain is up next year, and his top deputy just lost, so maybe he needs to be a little worried.
Interesting. Number 4.
Yeah. Common Core. Okay, this is an education story, but it's also a politics story. And often the education and the politics don't really seem to go together. It's something playing out in the classroom, but it's become very politicized. These are new education standards that were developed by the National Governors Association, Democrats and Republicans.
Including our governor.
Including our governor, with a lot of support from chambers of commerce and business leaders. And it has become a very hot issue with really the kind of Tea Party wing of the Republican Party. A lot of protests, a lot of allegations that it's a federal overreach, even though it's a state program, but there's some federal money attached to it in some ways, so that's kind of the argument. But we have a governor who is probably running for president. We have a senator who is running for governor, and both of them started off as very strong supporters of Common Core, and both of them have taken it back.
But business community still supports it.
Very much. So it's really interesting to see if they will stick with David Vitter, for example.
And it's in place in schools already.
It's in place. It's happening.
Okay. Number 3.
Despite their best efforts,
Yes.
It's happening, lawsuits and everything. Number 3, Steve Scalise, the congressman from Metairie who represents the 1st District, is now the number 3 guy in the House of Representatives. And it really marks a remarkably quick rise for him. He's only been in Congress since 2008. He's a longtime legislator who actually wanted to run for that seat for a long time, kind of had to wait for Bobby Jindal and David Vitter to go there and then run for something bigger. But once he got to Congress, he really established himself as a star very quickly. And he joined the Tea Party caucus. He had a group called the Republican Study Conference, which is the House Conservatives. And he was chosen after Eric Cantor lost and there was a shakeup. He was elected by his colleagues kind of as an emissary from the right wing of the party to the leadership, which is considered more moderate. And that puts him in a really interesting position because he now has to basically be part of the leadership and try to get things passed, even though some of the people who support him don't like that. And there are actually some new ads running against him saying, he's cozying up to Obama, which is really kind of ironic if you know Steve Scalise, because he's very, very conservative.
Yes, he's not cozying up to Obama. Number 2.
Ray Nagin goes to prison. Of course, we started off the year with the former mayor on trial. Despite New Orleans' reputation, he's the first mayor that's been convicted. And it's a really sad story. Obviously, 12 years ago, he was elected as a reformer. Specifically, he talked about contracts. He talked about changing the way New Orleans does business. And he ended up having a big contracting scandal that brought him down. He was convicted at trial of 20 counts, and he was sentenced to 10 years. It could have been worse. He was probably lucky in the judge he got.
And he's serving it now.
He's serving it now, yeah.
We have to move to number 1 now.
Bill Cassidy, our new senator, goodbye Mary Landrieu. This was, again, a huge change, not unexpected given the politics of the state. But Mary Landrieu, of course, was the last Democrat serving statewide, and such an institution, had been in the Senate for 18 years, was, really the leader of the Katrina recovery. And, but I mean, the tide was working against her. I don't think there's anything she could have done. And what happens now is that we're really a one-party state, officially. I think we've been moving in that direction. So it raised a lot of questions about what's going to happen in the governor's race. Will there be a viable Democrat, or will it be kind of an all-Republican fight? And when it's an all-Republican fight, that's an interesting place for Democrats to be, because then they're the swing vote, so they actually have some power, not the party, but the voters.
Also,
we used to be a one-party state, but
the other way.
Back then we were Democrats, and
Right.
so
Exactly.
the time when we've been an active two-party state has been just very narrow.
Really, not more than a decade.
And our congressional delegation is all now male.
It is all now male. It's the first time in a long time, yeah.
And the voting majority in Louisiana is female, so it's a female voting majority that
Electing
defeated
males.
the
Yeah.
cumulative.
Okay, thanks, Don. Don. Thanks, Stephanie. On to Don.
On to Don.
You're Don. And projects.
Major projects. Well, for the second year in a row, the city saw more than $1 billion let in construction permits. So construction permits are up and continue to go up on the rise. They were really high in 2007, right after Katrina, and then there was some time off. And then 2013, 2014 have been huge. Number 5 on my list, the St. Charles Avenue streetcar project. For the first time in what feels like forever, you can get on a streetcar in downtown New Orleans and ride all the way to Carrollton and Claiborne. The new ties have been put in. You don't have to get off and take a bus anywhere. That project is complete and going, and it timed very well with the awarding 2 weeks ago of it being a National Historic Landmark. Number 4 on my list, the Riverwalk reopening. This was a shopping mall in downtown New Orleans that was really very empty and tired and old, even probably before Hurricane Katrina, and then stores were dwindling after that. The Howard Hughes Corporation came in, did a $70 million renovation, made it the first downtown high-end outlet center anywhere in America. And I don't know what their numbers are yet. I can tell you anytime I have been in there, it's actually full. People are shopping downtown. The cruise ship people go in, but locals are going in too, and that's what they said would happen. If they built it, they will come, and the tax dollars will stay in the city of New Orleans. The Riverwalk reopened in May of this year.
And we have a Neiman Marcus last
There's
call.
There's a Neiman Marcus last call there,
Yes.
and a Coach store and some other high-end stores that weren't in New Orleans proper yet. Number 3 on the list, the Central City revitalization. If you have not driven down Aretha Castle Haley Boulevard recently, you really need to. This is an area much like Ferret Street was a couple years back, really run down, vacancies everywhere. Now the Southern Food and Beverage Museum has a new home there, a new beautiful home that opened in September 2014. Cafe Reconcile, the program that really gives people youth who are at risk and on the streets a leg up and some experience, practical experience, serving food and cooking food and getting into the hospitality industry. They just underwent a major renovation. The New Orleans Jazz Orchestra is going to have a future home in the former Gators, I don't even know what kind of store, but in the former Gators store. That is the future home of the New Orleans Jazz Orchestra. The old Myrtle Banks School has been redone and reopened in other uses. It is there's landscaping, there's architecture that's been brought back to life. It is a complete change of face for that part of Central City, and it's spreading from there, and that's what's happening with Ferret Street too. Number 2 on my list, Hollywood South. For the first time, New Orleans, Hollywood South is bigger than real Hollywood. There were more productions done here than there were in Los Angeles. Last year, it contributed $813 million. So the source is Film New Orleans. They say $813 million to New Orleans. The numbers aren't out for 2014 yet. But there are producers who say, besides the tax breaks, we're saving other money doing our projects there now too, because it used to be when we started with those tax breaks coming to the city of New Orleans or the state of Louisiana to do our films, we still shipped everything back to Los Angeles for post-production. There was a huge FedEx bill at the end of the production. Now they say there's so much opportunity to do post-production and sound work and other work here that they're saving on those costs too. There were 14 films and TV shows in production in Louisiana, far outpacing real Hollywood, and the actors are investing in real estate and staying involved. Sandra Bullock staying involved in schools, and
it employs New Orleans locals too.
Plenty of New Orleans
our
locals.
Makeup, our makeup person here, Courtney, gets
right,
employed
and some of the hair people. We've lost people to Hollywood
Right.
South, and as you see construction all over the city with these big projects, you also see Hollywood trucks everywhere.
Yeah. Okay, we need to get to South Market now.
Number 1 on the list, the South Market District, which actually did not get completed in 2014. Most of it will be opening in 2015. This is a $200 million residential retail project in the CBD. It's 4 blocks of Loyola Avenue between Julia and Lafayette that has totally been transformed. It was vacant parking lots that have now risen to be apartments and stores and restaurants, a lot of local companies, not national chains, but Magasin Kitchen and Ursa Major, which are local restaurants that are opening a second location downtown. Bar 3, which is a yoga and ballet studio that's uptown, is opening a second location downtown. It will increase the downtown living population, the neighborhood downtown. But beyond just increasing taxes downtown and people being downtown, it's that total transformation right there by between the Superdome and the new Rouses, if people need some perspective.
That's a good landmark there.
It's totally transformed. Vacant parking lots where there's now new life.
There'll be neighborhood services built into this whole complex
Built into
too.
right. You've got the post office across the street. You've got the grocery store already. You've got restaurants coming in, and
just really increasing the walkability of the city, and that's of course what we want to see.
New neighborhood.
Right. Okay. Thanks a lot, Don. It's the wild card time now with the Wild Man Errol.
Yeah, wild card. These are the things that didn't necessarily fit in anybody's list, but still deserving of mention though. But before that, I want to have a special mention for something that was personally sad for us involved with the show, and that was the loss of our friend John McGinnis during the past year. John was an extraordinary political observer, a great wit, great humor. He could have been on the national stage. He chose to live and work in Baton Rouge and was the best. And he died just as the legislative session was coming to an end and as a major Senate race was starting. He did leave a legacy with his LaPolitics.com, and he had someone who was working for him as a apprentice, Jeremy Alford, who we've had on the show several times. And so, in that sense, his work lives on, but it was a real blow to this show. On the list, the wild card list, I always put on this list as number 5, Mardi Gras and Jazz Fest. And the reason I do that is because they're both at the beginning of the year, so by the end of the year, people forget about them, and they have an enormous impact on the economy. The Jazz Fest was just tremendous this year. I'll always remember Bruce Springsteen playing 2 hours nonstop. Mardi Gras was a downer in that Mardi Gras day was cold and wet. It was the most miserable Mardi Gras day ever, at least in my calculation. But still, both of them do a lot for the city in the early part of the year. Number 4, Anthony Davis and Drew Brees. We are blessed right now that we have, with our first of all, we're blessed to have 2 professional teams, but among those 2 teams, we have 2 stars who are just national level people and really class people. Drew Brees has probably been to the peak of his career, and we hope he stays there for a while. Anthony Davis is reaching the peak of his career, and he's going to be a huge star in the NBA, and he's going to bring a lot of attention to New Orleans. And they're both class people. Number 3, newspaper reposition. This has been so fascinating to watch. A couple of years ago, we were complaining that it looks like we wouldn't have any daily newspaper at all. Now we have a daily newspaper in terms of the Advocate. The Picayune is 3 times a week, except during football season when it's sort of like 6 or 7 times a week. So we have like a daily newspaper in like 2/3 right now, which is much better than we ever thought we'd have. And so in a sense, at this stage, it's really worked out well, and they both do fine jobs. And Stephanie, I think the Advocate has done a fine job. The number 2. I'm sorry. Number 3 on the list. Number 2.
Number 2, yeah.
Okay. Is the whole restaurant spiral. There's always been news about restaurants, and we saw some incredible news this year, mostly with new restaurants opening, with changes in restaurants. The biggest story, of course, was with the Brennan's family. And instead of restaurants dying, you just add restaurants. And so we have Ralph Brennan, who's opening, who's got the old Brennan's name. We have Ted Brennan, who was running the old Brennan's, who reportedly is going to be opening a new restaurant. We have Broussard's under new management, and we just see more and more growth in the restaurant business. It just gets bigger and bigger, and we're seeing that the restaurant business has always been a good area of opportunity for ethnics, and so we've seen a lot of ethnics restaurants running, but we're also seeing things like Mofo, which is basically sort of a Vietnamese restaurant, but it's not Vietnamese who are running it. I mean, it's a guy who used to work at a French restaurant and having great success. And so we're at the stage now where we have this ethnic food and that people of different nationalities are all just pitching in and fixing it. And so we really are a melting pot in terms of food. And number 1, and maybe this is going to be a number 1 story for a while, just the New Orleanians, the people that are just excited about New Orleans, who've come here, the younger people, I mean, the people in their 30s and 40s, who love this town. They see it as a place of opportunity that's not too expensive to live in, where the weather is decent most of the time of the year. And they're here and they're investing, and some of these are the people behind the new restaurants, or they're doing computer stuff and high-tech things, but they're a new energy level in the community, and New Orleans is going to be better because of them.
All right, we got about a minute and a half or so, 2 minutes, where you guys can jump in on this whole wild card list. Any comments from you all regarding any sort of restaurant spiral? Or what I notice with the restaurants is that still they're certainly, even with the new ethnic restaurants and then the new ones who are coming in just with their whole new menus, it's a lot of new stuff, a lot of new opportunities, and just whole new dishes. But there's always a Louisiana or New Orleans type of twist to it. These chefs are still drawing from what is our culture.
You certainly see things like pork belly on
a lot of pork belly,
menus.
that's true.
And I personally hate with the restaurant list one of their choices as being proteins, okay? I mean, that sounds like milkshake. But yeah, we do have the basis of Louisiana cooking. It's just that people are adapting to them and making them better.
I think we've seen a big surge too in, we're so well known for the high-end fancy, but there's this whole new segment of specialty kind of fun restaurants that are in a lower price range. Right. The restaurants that just do hot dogs or just do hamburgers or just do, you wonder if it's a trend that's going to continue, but Dat Dog just sells hot dogs, and Company Burger is known just for their burgers. And they're, some of the restaurants on Ferret and Magazine Street who appeal to us, maybe the new Orleans budget, the people who are just starting out.
And how about for that, sort of younger entrepreneurial crowd? We have the pop-up restaurants,
or the food trucks are huge.
Exploded.
And these kind of mini empires. I mean, Dat Dog is one of them. Not people aren't opening one restaurant; they're opening one, and then they're opening not even a different branch of the same thing, but they're trying something different, and that's really fun too.
Yeah. There's a restaurant called Milkfish on Carrollton that started as a pop-up in another place, and so you're seeing more and more examples. Also, you see more restaurant entrepreneurs, people like John Besh, who keep on opening restaurants. He opened something called Johnny Sanchez this year, which is a Mexican restaurant. He opened a pizza restaurant in a magazine. So more than a chef, he's becoming an entrepreneur.
All right, changes in New Orleans, which have always had change in New Orleans, even though we remain
faster.
the same.
It's more
we
and
still want to
faster
remain
and,
the same
and
too,
new people involved.
Okay.
So.
Predictions. Got to go to that now.
Well, the big story in the next coming years is going to be the elections, the gubernatorial elections. I kind of have a hunch that the guy who's going to be a surprise is John Bell Edwards. He's low profile now, but he goes into it as a lone Democrat, and that can give him a lot of credentials. That can open a lot of doors for him. But right now, it still looks like the guy to beat is going to be David Vitter.
All right, Mike.
Well, if there's not a bandwagon already, I'd like to start one for the New Orleans Pelicans. We have a national superstar in Anthony Davis. Easy prediction is that he'll be an all-star starter, but I also think that Pelicans will be in the playoff hunt in the very, very tough Western Conference.
I predict that the World Trade Center development will finally be signed off on.
Holy moly.
And after the third attempt, it will be third time is the charm on that
Third
one.
time the charm.
Okay. Edwin Edwards, 87 years old, out of prison, new father. He didn't make it to Congress, but he had so much fun running. I think he's going to find a way to get us to keep covering him, because that's what he does.
Indeed, he will. Thanks so much, you guys. Happy New Year to you. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again next week in the new year. Happy New Year to everybody. Have a good evening.